Guests, they really aren't booking a hotel. They're trying to book feelings, they're trying to book memories. Back when mobiles came along, we started having websites for mobile and websites for desktops. We're going to start having websites for agents and websites for humans.
You guys Guestcentric partners with thousands of hotels. What have you learned from the link between that staff turnover, staff engagement in the property, and that guest connection?
You have to end up hiring for the warmth of the people that really like to engage with guests and train them for skill, right? Now, obviously, tech can help. Tech is a good facilitator of understanding.
What is the biggest challenge for the hoteliers to deliver that emotional connection?
I would say probably the biggest bottleneck is
Pedro Colaco is the CEO of Guestcentric, the award-winning platform helping thousands of independent hotels boost direct bookings and stand out online. A regular voice in hospitality tech circles, Pedro is known for championing emotional connections between hotels and their guests.
What's up, hospitality? My name is Mauricio Schiller, your host today, and welcome to the Talking Hospitality podcast by the Schulering Hub. Today, 88% of travelers say that's important to have an emotional connection to a brand so they would return. And to talk about that and a lot more around leadership and hospitality, I'm very, very glad to have in the show Pedro Colaco from Guestcentric. Pedro, welcome to the show.
No, welcome and thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here and to have this conversation. We had a chat before today just to get to know each other, and we went to depths of life, AI, and hospitality. And I'm very excited to exchange some information with you here, and I hope that our audience also can enjoy this chat. But Pedro, you started as a developer, moved into marketing, and today you are the CEO of Guestcentric, which is an impactful hotel technology company. And you have a complete booking ecosystem, right? It's a website, booking engine, revenue system, and an integration facilitator, and even a marketing agency. What did you first realize, or when did you first realize that emotion, not just features, was a real driver for bookings and guest loyalty?
So I think that's a great question, and it's sort of a great start to the conversation. So if you think about how Guestcentric started, the reason why we started the company was that we had this vision that the big brands like Hilton and Marriott and Accor, they had a budget, they had staff, they had tech, they had marketing, they had everything. And the independents and the boutique brands, they had the internet, right? And we wanted to give them a solution that would enable these independents and these boutiques to reach the guests directly. And that's why we call the company Guestcentric, right? But since day one, we've been true believers of behavioral economics, right? Very much inspired by Dana Ariely's studies from 2000 and 2003. And, everything that has to do with, there's a rational side to the mind, but there's also an irrational sort of more reptilian side to the mind that helps make consumers make decisions that really shows that emotion is a dominant factor when making decisions. So we always took that into account. And that was an underlying tone when we started the company. Very early on, right, we did a lot of studies, and our research showed that while very pragmatic things like price and features are important, emotion ends up shaping the decisions. So we did a lot of A/B testings. We tested emotional copy. We tested imagery. And really what we found out is that the emotional copy and the imagery beat the feature list. So because guests, they really aren't booking a hotel. They're trying to book feelings. They're trying to book memories. They're really not booking Wi-Fi or a large room, right? They're trying to book a memory. And I think that's really what makes a difference here is when people travel, they're not booking a hotel, they're booking a memory. There's obviously different uses of travel, right? If I'm going to ITB, in Berlin, then it's probably a very transactional thing. I really don't care that much about where I'm staying. But if I'm traveling with my family on my annual vacation, then certainly I'm much more emotionally involved, and my decision is going to be much more emotional. So obviously, there's gray scale. There's a gray scale here in terms of how much emotion, how much rational goes into my decision. But I think that very early on, we found out that the emotional piece of the decision making process is really very important.
That's amazing how to think through emotions as the driver, because when it comes to the hotels, when the transactional part of the hotels, as hoteliers, we normally thought that was just get the money, sell the room. Right? It's amazing how it took that long for hoteliers to start realizing, or for the industry itself to start realizing that it's the emotion. And now we are getting to a second level of that emotion. And it's who actually makes the decisions. And normally the wife. Now we're is the kids. So we should talk to them. How you guys are working with these variations that are coming more evident right now?
So that's an excellent point, right? So obviously the consumer behavior changes, and we are seeing, for instance, that different generations have different consumer behaviors, right? In 2022, we realized after the pandemic, which was obviously a disaster for the whole industry, but we came out of it very strong, right? And the industry was really booming in the sense that I think after COVID, people realize that people don't have that long to live, so they better enjoy while their time here on the planet. So the experience economy really took a boost, and people started traveling, enjoying their lives, experiencing things. So out of that experience economy came really a lot of economic boom for hotels. And out of that experience economy and out of the pandemic also came a direct relationship with the hotels, and people realized that actually guests realized that having a direct relationship with the hotels was actually very beneficial, because the hotels knew what was going on in the destination. They were able to tell them, if restaurants were open or not during COVID and stuff like that. So we came out of the pandemic with, many hotels with 50%, 60% direct bookings. So we came out of it and we said, actually, what we set out to build in, 2008, 2009 has been achieved. So what do we need to build for the next 10 years? And one of the things that we looked at was how our consumer habits changing. And one of the things we looked at specifically was, how is Gen Z different than all the other generations? And there's a few characteristics there that are very different. One of them is this short attention span, this notion that I want to consume things quickly. I want to see exactly what I want, and I don't want to have any noise around me, right? So I want to have this truly personalized feed of information that enables me to make decisions very quickly. And going back to your original question, which is, how do we take that into account, is now I need to really, maybe with people like me, I wanted to see a long list of options, and I wanted to be able to scroll through them and make my own decisions. Now people want to see small lists of options that have been tailored to them, right?
Mhm.
And I don't, if I'm traveling, and a good example is, if my party is 2 people, I don't want to see options for 5 and 6 and 7 people, right? I don't want to see a big house as an option to stay, because for 2 people that makes no sense. So we need to tailor the options much more to what people are searching. And I think technology enables us to do that nowadays. And I think that's where the industry is going.
Cool. When you mentioned about the pandemic, you mentioned about that period that was really hard, was a really hard hit on everyone. And we are talking about this emotional connection that doesn't only happen during the purchase phase, but it should happen at the property as well, right?
Yeah.
You guys Guestcentric partners with thousands of hotels, and studies show that the hotel staff turnover can reach up to 73, 80%. I even heard annually turnover in hospitality in some locations. One of the highest of any industry around the world. From your perspective, what have you learned from the link between that staff turnover, staff engagement in the property, and that guest connection?
Sure. So one thing that I've learned is for sure when there's less staff turnover, there's more guest connection, right? So we all know that from personal experience that let's say not hotels, but let's say restaurants, right? If you go to a restaurant and if the people are always the servers are always the same and they, recognize you, that's just something that you want to go back to. And for two reasons. Sometimes it's like, oh, do you want to have that thing that you like? Or, oh, I have something new that you want to try out. So it's for the comfort of being known, for the comfort of having things that you know and actually learning something new. So I think that there's this notion that when your staff has been there for 10, 15, 20 years, it's a very well known thing, and that just builds the identity of a place, whether it's a restaurant, a hotel, or anything that has to do with hospitality. If there's high staff turnover, there's really that memory doesn't exist. So you have to build it in another way, right? You have to build it in through culture, through through training, right? So you have to end up hiring for the warmth of the people, and you really have to hire people that really like to engage with guests. Not that they're great operationally, but really people that like to engage with guests and train them for skill, right? Now, obviously, tech can help, right? And tech is a good facilitator of understanding, okay, so Mauricio was there 3 times. He always orders the steak tartare, but that cannot come across as a performance, right? It has to come across as something that people feel and sort of really want to ask you, do you really want to do that, right? So you have to ritualize these small consistent touches that feel personal. I think it's even worse for independents, right? Because within chains you can move people around because you can give people career paths. Within independence it's more difficult because there's only so many steps along the ladder that you could put people along. So inevitably people are going to move on. So you have to build this escalator of progress, right? You have to say, okay, people come here and then they move to the next step and they move to the next step and then they move out. So you really have to think through how you're going to develop your people, how you're going to maintain your people, and understand that some of them, which are probably the most talented one, are going to move on to greener pastures somewhere else because they want to progress in their careers. So I think that there's the notion that you need to invest in your staff, but also understanding that potentially they're going to move on because with independence, there's not that much that you can do to keep them there.
Yeah,
On
but
the other
I
hand,
love.
just one more thing. I
Yeah,
think it's also very important to keep this notion of I love I love the notion of alumni, right? That people really sort of respect and love where they started or where they've been happy. So if you have your staff happy, and if they move on, they will recommend your place for other people to start their careers, for other people to come back to end their careers at with a lot of experience. So this notion of alumni can also be a way to keep that memory alive.
one thing, well done. I love that. But why I really love that you said here is about that framework as a solution for the dependents. For example, that yes, you may lose your people, your best people in the long term, but if you put a framework that works with easy steps that will be consistent during the service, people that will come, they will feel that they are getting the same type of service. So even though it's not the same person, can change that experience by creating a structured framework that will repeat the experience. Of course,
Exactly.
some restaurants go to the extremes, like chain fast food chains, to repeat the same script that is boring, it's robotic, it's annoying at some point.
Yeah.
But if you can create a smart framework that is repeatable, it's easy to memorize, and is still think it's guest-centric, right? It's thinking
Yeah.
about the guest, we can get around that losing of the natural loss of people, independent hoteliers. But I love how you went through some of, like, yes, we have the digital, we have the staff training, and we have the culture of the place. But if you could choose one bottleneck, what is the biggest challenge for the hoteliers to deliver that emotional connection? Is it like the website and the booking engine? Is the technology there? Is the staff training, the onboarding, or is really the leadership culture around it?
I would say probably the biggest bottleneck is in leadership, right? I think in two ways, right? Where leaders really own the guest story end to end, it really works. And where they don't own the guest story end to end, nothing sticks, right? So leadership really drives sort of the culture throughout the organization. And I think one of the problems is that leadership often undervalues like small loyalty drivers, and they're very focused on the P&L or on the spreadsheets, or are hiding in the office, or are being hunted down by the owners for this, that, and the other, right? Or are looking at the expense line of the energy bill and the whatever, and the F&B costs and the food costs and all that stuff, right? So that's one. So the best managers that I see are certainly the people that spend a lot of time out in the property, trying to understand what guests are experiencing, right? And then bringing that back into the digital world, right? Because what happens on property gives you the signals that you need then to translate into the digital world. And this is where I see probably the biggest gap, is that a lot of the GMs are really not that educated on the digital side. They really don't know how to translate. They really don't know how to talk a lot to the revenue managers, to the marketing people often, right? They don't know, necessarily what SEO means and what the signals are and all that stuff. So I think that there's a big gap there. I've actually started a few weeks ago a little booklet, just like maybe a 10-page or a 12-page booklet on sort of helping GMs become fluent in digital, because I think that, so that they can have an interesting meeting with their revenue managers, right? Where they can ask questions that are relevant and help move the thing forward. Because, for instance, the front desk can be a good signal for what they need to do on their website, right? The best leaders are the leaders that are actually walking the property and that have truly a natural appetite to be involved in digital also, because the digital is where it all starts, right? People don't start by walking. There's no walk-ins any longer, right? Walk-ins they walk into the lobby of your hotel online, not in your property.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the show and if you're learning something new today, please consider following the show, subscribe to our channel, or leave us a review. It helps us to help more people through the podcast, and it would mean the world to us. Thank you for listening, and we're back on the chat. And let me ask you a tricky question about what you just said, right? GMs, this gap of skills, they are not acquiring those skills because they lack of motivation to do something. I mean by that is, well, we are reaching profitable, we are profitable, it's okay. It's lack of time because they are overwhelmed, or it's fear to be seen that they don't understand.
I think so I'm going to break this down into two, right? I think if they work for a chain, typically that discipline is not in the purview of the GM because it's run by the chain, and therefore it's not that important, right? Because, there's the chain people that do all the distribution and do all that stuff. So they end up not having that much to say there. So they're not that involved. And then the independents, I think they're so busy with operations that typically they sort of, how can I say this, outsource that to the director of sales, right? And they say, okay, the director of sales takes care of that. I'm not sure that it's lack of interest or lack of knowledge, but I do know that it's super important that people start looking at this, right? Because without sales, right, and without people coming in, there's no P&L, right? There's that line on top called income and revenue, right? And that comes almost 100% in independence and from online, right? So digital is almost 100% of that line. So I do think that there's a gap there, and that there's a lot to be done in terms of educational stuff that we can bring to the table to have GMs, you know, more about what it means to be online and distribution, and how to attract guests, and how to maximize the effect of bringing guests direct versus through the OTAs and stuff like that, right? Because at the end of the day, it's all about maximizing the profit and sort of the guest experience, so that the next guests are also very happy, and you create a compounding effect, right? I traditionally say that direct is not about getting more margin just because you don't pay commission, right? It's because you're going to get better guests that are going to be happier. You're going to personalize their experience, and they're going to bring better guests that are going to be happier, and you're going to personalize the experience, and it compounds, right?
And you guys have worked with Guestcentric with over 2,000 hotels.
Yeah.
And we are talking about challenge. So let's think about some solutions here from these 2,000 hotels that you have experienced, that you've been in touch with. What are the couple of most interesting solutions that you've seen hotels to use to improve that guest emotional connection? We can start with something more traditional, and then we dive into something more tech savvy.
Sure. So I think a traditional thing is sort of to send on a pre-arrival email or a pre-arrival message to say, hey, what brings you to town, and one small thing I can do to improve your stay, right? And really to act upon. And actually, what brings you to town tells you a lot, right? Because if it's an open question, so they can say, I'm coming for a conference, or I'm coming for business, or it's my anniversary, or it's my wife's birthday, or whatever, right? So that gives you a lot of context about what this person is coming for, right? And then if you ask them one small thing to improve your stay, and you actually execute on it, that starts becoming your identity, right? And it could be something simple. I really need extra hangers in my closet because I'm coming for a wedding, right? It could be, I need extra towels because of whatever, right? So it could be something very simple. It has operational implications, right? So you need to be operationally ready to execute. But it really becomes, if you can put that and you design that into your workflow, it really can become the identity of your hotel, and people start, feeling it, right? Because they go like, oh, I asked for this, it happened. I asked for this, it happened. And it becomes the identity of your hotel, that you really are able to personalize your stay. So I really think that asking these questions, understanding why people are coming to your destination, and then trying to a little personalization at arrival is really something interesting. And it's not about the little, plate of whatever fruit that you put in the room, that people just, that's not personalization, right? That anybody can do that. On the tech side, right? I think where we see things going is really sort of, and this is what we introduced in March of this year, which is it's brand new tech. It's these intent-aware booking flows, right? Actually, when somebody goes into a website, we know a lot about these people. We know where they're coming from. We know how big the party is. We know if children are included. We know the dates they're searching, right? So we know a lot, right? So one good example is, if the party includes children, I can push babysitting services, right? That actually can do as an add-on, and they will then partner with the hotels, and they'll come and take care of your kids for whatever, right? For a few hours. So this intent-aware booking flows, where you can detect whether it's the trip purpose, whether it's the party, whether it is what the date, where we can automatically, based on a large set of things to personalize the experience, push the right thing in front of the customer. So personalization on one side. The other thing is take friction away, right? So one of the things that has been most successful that we've seen in hotels nowadays is this notion that, people can just book without typing. So that I can go, I can select the dates. I can, I don't need to put in my personal information, because I can book with Google, and then I can pay with Apple Pay. And that's it, right? And I don't ever need to type my name. I don't ever need to type credit card numbers. Everything is completely automatic on my mobile, and I don't need to type anything. So I think that those two things are really super powerful. So personalizing the stay, because I know what the guest may or may not need, and then this notion that I can frictionless check out.
Cool. And one comment that I want to do in your more traditional part, I believe that the hardest thing of that uh, delivering the service, that simple services, is about communication in the hotels, and that's what probably the leadership should be working on, is how to flow communication in a better way. Because we had this example from my advisor to the board here from Schulering and Najat, and yeah, and he used to say that it's communication is what made his hotels very successful, in a way that if there was a booking and was a surprise for the wife, or because it was an anniversary and there was a note, they would tell the driver, the taxi that would pick them up, just to whisper in the husband's ear and say, like, is everything taken care of? So it's just that little connection, that very simple, but it needs to through communication. There's it's basically zero cost to do that.
Yeah, that's
as long
perfect.
as you can have that flow of communication, right?
Yeah, perfect. That's a perfect example.
And if we would think about some steps, some a workflow that we could give to hoteliers, to independent hoteliers, to really build that emotional connection. Let's think about a hotel with a 6-room independent hotel, and what 3 steps they could take the next 7 days and see results, and how they would measure that.
Okay. All right. So I would say, again, trying to go back to what we discussed, right? I would say, okay, so take a look at your homepage, right? Make sure that the homepage is emotionally involving. It has good imagery. It has good copy in terms of bringing the emotion and the experience that people are going to have. So it becomes your lobby, right? Take a look at your booking engine. Instead of having copy like standard room or double room, come up with copy like something like, wake up to city views in a space designed for slow mornings and great coffee. Or so add the emotional piece to it, add the sensory piece to it, right? Talk about senses, smells is really important, because your website and your booking engine need to be cinematic, right? They need to sort of put you in the place. Then the other thing is very important. You need to have some messaging on your website and on your booking engine that convey trust and urgency. So things like best rate guarantee, social proof that you're a good hotel, that sort of stuff is really important, right? So you need to measure how many people land on your website, how many people go to your booking engine, how many people convert, and see if that improves. Then for me, step 1, because I'm a digital guy, right? So I would focus on digital first. The second thing is I would introduce those pre-arrival things, right? What brings you to town? One small thing to improve your staff. Route those answers to the staff, and then try to figure out, are people replying? Because a lot of people are not going to reply, right? You're going to send emails out saying, what brings you to town? One small thing to improve. And a lot of people are not going to reply. How many people are going to reply? And then try to measure somehow for those who reply, try to close the feedback loop at checkout and say, hey, how was your stay? Did we deliver on what you asked for? Blah, 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 that sort of stuff. I would add a third step to this, guest touch points, right? Whatever it is, whether it is sending a spa discount if you have a spa, or some sort of a welcome message, but for longer stays, to make sure that there's engagement during the stay and that people feel that they're being taken care of. I think that's the overarching theme, is that they feel that there's somebody there that is ready to take care of them if they need to, right? On digital, you need to make sure that every touch point says, I'm here to service you. I think the same on property, right? To some extent, you need to be there saying, I'm here to service you, without being imposing.
And this touch point, would it be via message, or would it be something like a little message saying, that's the menu of tonight? This goes well with some wine. This is the wine that we're offering. Something like this?
Something like this. Something like, it could be something like that, but it also could be something more personal. It could be tech, but it also could be something personal, right? Like whatever. Did you know that something is going on in our bar tonight? Please stop by. We have a happy hour from 5 to 7, whatever. So again, I'm not an operations person, but I do think that, especially for longer stays, if somebody's staying 2 nights, probably they don't care, right? They really don't want to hear about it. But if for longer stays, I think you want to engage people and to show that there's options within the property for people to do things.
And if we would open here a little bit of a brainstorm of the future, right? Like
Okay.
that's the cool part here where we go crazy. But we are very shaken by what's going on around us right now, right? With the introduction of the LLMs and agentic world now, and everything is moving a speed that, look, I always loved technology and I always try to follow everything that is happening to have at least awareness, right? I don't like news, but I like technology. I like what's going on. However, now I am overwhelmed. I cannot, I'm deciding what I follow right now. I decided it's hard, you know. So with this, what do you make up of the AI agentic world and where we getting into it?
So I like to, first say, I think there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of people trying to sell you stuff that really probably doesn't work. So I'd like to start with that. So sort of looking at the future, right? Obviously, we're at a tectonic shift. I do think that things are going to change quite dramatically. And I do think that Gen AI is sort of a dramatic shift that happened, right? And I think the biggest shift that happened was consumers understood that technology can be magic, right? I think Gen AI really showed that technology can be magic, that you go like, okay, I type this and this comes out. I never knew that this was possible. And for me, that's sort of the big transformation that Gen AI really brought to the table, right? Now, I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, agents are going to take care of everything and it's going to be agents and MCP and so on. I really don't believe in that world. I believe in that world potentially for certain uses. Like, again, I go back to my ITB trip. I go typically 2 or 3 nights. I have my schedule. I have dinners. I have meetings. I have things to attend in the morning. If I put my schedule in there and into an agent and say, book me the optimal hotel, this is my budget, probably an agent can do a much better job than I can, right? Finding flights and hotels for that. So certainly there's uses for agentic booking, but if I'm, going to the Maldives for the first time with my family, I wouldn't trust an agent to do that. I will use an agent to help me in the discovery, but that's not going to be the only thing I'm going to do. So I do think that agents will drive discovery and booking flows. I do think that it's critical for hotels to be readable by agents. So things like schemas, like APIs, like structured content are going to be very critical, right? I do believe that things like short videos, new media types, which we don't even know what they are yet, are going to be critical. But at the end of the day, what is happening is people are searching deeper, right? Instead of hotel in London, I probably am going to search hotel in London for a family of 4 with a cool vibe and a bar where I can have a nice martini, blah, 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 blah. So the more I can say about what people experience in my property, and that matches what people say about my property, the more I'm going to be considered by getting the right guests into my property. So this is where my view is that hotels need to know which guests they want to attract and really cater to them, right? And really put that story out there and really resonate emotionally with them. And then obviously have the tech infrastructure that is able to speak the language to speak to these agents. Because I'll give an example. A booking engine today is something that is frictionless, right? It has to be frictionless for users. And you have to go through it and off you go. But agents have different friction points, right? So a booking engine for an agent will be something different than a booking engine for a human. And the same for a website, right? A website for an agent is going to be something different than a website for a human, right? Because probably the agent doesn't need videos and pictures. It needs structured content, and people are emotional with videos and images. So I think just like, back when mobiles came along, we started having websites for mobile and websites for desktops. We're going to start having websites for agents and websites for humans. And I think that's the vision that I have in my head, is that it's going to bifurcate first, and then it's going to converge again in the future. So that's what's going to happen. But I do believe that, big change is coming, but I think small brands are going to win in the end, because you can have your unique value published if you can make it consistent, and if you can make it indexable for the agents.
My question on that is, okay, we create then websites for humans, websites for agents, but we don't really understand how agents get the information, where they are getting the information, right? So
Yeah.
when you meaning by architecturing this website for agents, should we start considering applying content that's coming from Reddit, that's coming from really, because that's where they get the information from, right? From user generated content. So my question here is a little bit deeper, is if hotels need to start tailoring a lot more who the guests are so they can be found by agents, should they think about all these old reviews that they have from the time that they were not thinking about? Will this influence the agentic search to be found in the internet, and how can we solve that thing?
So we have no idea, right? So that
Yes.
I'm going to be as honest as possible. I don't think anybody knows, and everybody that says they know, I think they're really making it up. For me, I always say this, right? It feels like SEO 1.0, where people were writing, were keywords at the end of pages in the same. So I believe that because of where we are, and I have to believe that if it is artificial intelligence, it will try to match guest preferences with hotel delivery, right? So the best things that hotels can do is really promote what they deliver, right? Or what they intend to, what they ambition, right? And really try to deliver on what they ambition. Because if they say, I'm a great hotel, you blah, 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 and then it's noisy or there's construction or whatever, they won't be able to hide. Just like, with reviews, bad product wasn't able to hide. I think with agents, it's going to be even more difficult, right? Because they're going to be able to scour even more content about what's happening in the neighborhood. So from that perspective, bad product is going to be more difficult to sell, but good product is going to be easier to sell. And that's all I say. So I do think that hotels should stick to what they know. They should build good content. And, I think in a few months, in a year's time, we'll know a lot more about Reddit, this, that, and the other. But I wouldn't go crazy investing in all this crazy stuff, because what I wrote a post, the sources of where AI takes stuff from change. 50% of the sources change every month. So it's Reddit this month, next month, who knows what it's going to be. So I don't think we can, this is changing too fast.
Pedro, where are we putting ourselves into? No, because when I think through, like we humans, right? We think through solutions for problems that we want to solve, and then we create problems ahead that we don't understand, right? Who in the world thought that creating a short-term stay platform would create pressure on housing around the world? Right?
That's right.
Who thought that would have that relationship, right? It's just amazing, and I love that your honesty here, because yes, we don't know, and I don't think that we have been in this time in life where we don't know that's going to happen in the next 2 years, and it's kind of scary, it's kind of exciting, but I'm there. So to wrap it up, our conversation here, if you would leave our audience with a 60-second playbook to engineer emotional connection across the guest journey, like mobile, booking engine, pre-arrival, property first, is it?
I would say the first thing is there's no difference between your website and your booking engine for the guest. And that's sort of been our mantra since day one. There's only one unified digital lobby. So treat your website and your booking engine as one thing and lead with the one promise. What is it that people are going to experience at your hotel? Prove it with signals, right? Detect the purpose of the guest on your website. Show 2 or 3 paths, right? Don't have this 1, 2, 3 booking path. You have to have this fungible path that shows 2 or 3 paths and adapts to what people want. Take all the friction away. so that people can really book without any friction. And that's really what I would suggest is the playbook for the digital experience, right? A unified digital lobby, one promise, detect the signals, adapt to those signals, and make people book without any friction, right? Then from the pre-arrival perspective, what I suggested, ask 2 questions, provide maybe some suggestions about what people can do at your destination. Then on property, do something, whether it's a tour of the property where you show a few things, or a local welcome. And then post stay, I think the most important thing is people keep talking about loyalty and bringing people back to the properties. The properties we work with, other than resorts, have very little repeat guests, right? So I think it's really more important to give people a reason to talk about your property to people they know, and loyalty is about bringing other guests in than to bring them back. So because imagine if you have a property in Prague, right? How often do you really go back to Prague? No, the next thing you're going to go to Budapest, and then, right? So it's really about going back home to London and telling, oh, I stayed in Prague in this beautiful hotel, which had this wonderful thing across, and so on. So give them something that they can give to the next guy to come back. And so that's really what I think is this unified digital lobby, these 2 questions at pre-arrival, do something on property, and then bring the next guest in with the post stay. That's what I would say.
I love that playbook. Pedro Colaco, muito obrigado. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here. How can our audience get in touch with you and learn more about the Guestcentric?
Just check our website on guestcentric.com and check me out on LinkedIn. Pedro Colaco. You search me and I'm on LinkedIn, P. Colaco.
And I would suggest to follow Pedro if you don't, because he's a thought leader in the industry. He's always sharing his mind here. It's not about marketing. He's really sharing his minds and give some great ideas. That's how I got to know you and I got to know your work. So thank you very much, Pedro. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time here with us.
Thank you very much.
Schulerinos, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.